think in this new year has really brought a big change to me is my thinking on faith. As you know, some of you folks watching this know, I've spent a lot of years pushing the boundaries in my life as far as faith is concerned and understanding how to trust God. And I guess the hardest thing for me is I've always been a go-get-it type guy. And it's funny, often what we are, God seems to expect the opposite. And when the Spirit of God comes to our life, He intersects that and sanctifies that. He uses it, but He's only going to use it in accordance with what He's got going on, not with what I want to happen. So anyway, I'm just thinking about that and faith. So I've spent a lot of years where God will come along and He'll say something, I believe, put it in my heart. You know, when I say God speaks, it's not like we hear this audible voice. I mean, it's probably only ever happened once to me, but it's not like that's a common thing in my life. It might be for others. I think God speaks to us in a movement. It's like that feeling. Something comes into us, we feel that movement, and then we put the words on that movement. We try to understand that movement. In essence, we try to control that movement. Hopefully not. And faith is no different. So often God puts something on me and He said, you know, Scott, I want, I don't know, a house. And that's happened before in the US. And as He brings along a thing of a house, and I just feel like, then you try to work it. You're trying to make it happen. You're activating, you know, and the church sort of teaches us you have to activate your faith and put things into practice. And there's a truth in there, but it's not, you know, really the complete picture, if there is a complete picture. I don't know. It's just this new year, something's changed in me where I've realized something different about faith. And that's what I wanted to just touch on really briefly. So God comes along and He has made some promises. I felt people He wanted in my life, things around my life, some just different personal things that I don't need to go into the detail of here. There's no benefit to that, but things that mean a lot to me and have been a bit weird. And some of those things have not naturally, obviously, shown much sign of anything, but spiritually, they just sit there. And you get to that point, it's kind of, I tell people, it's like an addiction. You can get addicted to faith, where you need the faith to keep going, and then you try to pull the other way. And in an addiction, if you're trying to do it or you're trying not to do something, you're a prisoner to it either way. It'll get you coming or going. You really have to get into that place of just sitting where life is, when God just puts something in you. And that's the point of faith. To me now, this could be different for others, but to me personally, when God arrives with something, and let's use a house as an example. God comes along and says, I'm going to give you a house. And that's part of this. You know, how I got to that was pretty incredible, but I'm going to give you a house. So now I look at that and I'm like, oh, okay, it's a bit out there. But in the past, I would have been trying to do something with it. But now I'm not. I look and go, okay. So when I say okay, it's the arrival of faith. Faith is like God's will and Scott's will just became one. And when I said yes, I'm prepared to take that journey. I think heaven rejoices and God's just like, boom, it's done. It's already decided. It's decided what day it'll happen on. It's decided how it'll happen. Now I can look, and I used to think I can influence that. But, you know, the events of my life recently have shown me pretty clearly that I don't know that we have too much influence on time frames. It's just things seem to be ordained for when they're ordained. And we seem to be, the only control we have is how much misery we're going to inflict on ourselves on that journey. Are we going to enjoy it, or are we going to be miserable? And often that miserable comes because we're trying to control it. I don't understand. Why would you say this to me, God? You know, that's not ideal, this thing's not ideal, that person's not ideal, this, and we look on that natural level and we try to figure it out and bring control on that natural level. And that is exhausting. And when you actually get your miracle, and it's happened many times with me, when you get that thing and God finally brings it, you don't enjoy it because you're so worked up and trying to figure it out and almost feeling like you deserve it. Why'd you take so long, God? And so this new year comes around and God says, house. When I say yes, God, faith is entered. When I say yes, God, all of heaven stands behind that yes. Now, just sit in that. Don't try to figure it out. Don't try to rush it. Don't try to hope, oh, it's got to happen now. We all want it now, but God has his journey that we have to be on. And I started to see, and it was even just today, it hit me so profoundly in my life. I understood the greatest act of faith is to not work towards that. It's actually to stop and say, God, when that entered my life, I received it. I believe it. It's who I am. And I'm so much at ease, if that's the word, forever at ease. I'm so much able to let go. I leave it with you. When that's supposed to be, it's going to be. And I'm just, you know what, I'm just going to live my life. I'm going to go to the river. Today I'm going to go to the river. I'm going to go to the river and swim with my kids. I'm going to, you're going to live life. You don't sit around going, God, what am I going to do? How am I going to make this happen? I think the best one is brother here, Marius, that just, you know, for years, him and I have walked together in great fellowship. And probably about 2 years ago, we were chatting, and when I was in Portugal, we were chatting and just said, Marius, I really feel you're going to be the general manager of where you are. And he was not, he was just a sales guy. He'd been there for a long time. I'm not just a sales guy. He was a sales guy. He'd been there for a long time, and I don't know, 15 years maybe. Marius took that on board, and we agreed together. There was unity in it. And then he's like, then we're like, you ought to talk to your boss and ask him. He went and asked his boss. He activated it. And his boss says, yeah, basically, yeah, no. and long story shorter, they sold that dealership, and Marius moved from Subaru and started selling cars in Mazda. And he didn't think about this every day. We talked about this recently. He didn't sit and think about it and try to make it happen and force it. It was in him. When he said yes, it was in him. He just knew something bigger was there. Anyway, he probably 3 or 4 months ago, not even now, he got a phone call from his old boss, and he's not even working in that guy's company now. And the guy owns another dealership and says to him, hey, would you consider being our sales manager? And Marius, I just didn't feel it. I felt there was something bigger. So he said no. And 2 days later, the guy calls him back and says, would you consider being the general manager of the dealership? And he's like, yeah, I would. And that's what I get at. Marius didn't spend 2 years fixating on it, 2 years trying to make it happen, 2 years trying to it was in him, and it was growing in him, and he felt the peace of it. But when it came about, there was the celebration. It was already decided when it was going to happen. That's our New Year thing. The greatest act of faith we can have is to leave it with God. When God puts it in us and says, this is what I'm going to do for you. This is what I'm going to give you. We take it. It is now who we are. It's not what we do. It's who we are. Now in that who we are, we say, God, it's all in your hands. I'm out. I'm in. It's in me and I'm in it. But I am not going to work it. I'm just going to receive it. I'm going to be at peace. I'm going to enjoy my life. And I think that's where religion hit me in the past. Because in religion, you feel like you've got to do something. I've got to try harder. I've got to get there. And let's be honest, it's all coming from a heart where we don't feel loved. We don't feel like we deserve it. We don't feel like God actually wants to do that for us. How could he want to do that for me? I'm a nobody. But we can't grasp the fact that God just delights in us. He loves us. delights in us. It's unconditional love. It doesn't matter what you've done. It doesn't matter if you screw up. It doesn't matter if you're still screwing up. Everything you've done in the past, everything you're doing today, and everything you're doing tomorrow, when you're in Jesus, it's already forgiven. Think of the freedom in that. Everything of your past, your present, and your future is forgiven. The whole problem just lies with us. And again, every video I'm making, I think, is coming back to this. My life is my responsibility. It doesn't matter what somebody's done to me. You know, my marriage fell apart. I can sit and blame that person the rest of my life. And maybe I am a victim, and maybe those things have happened. But if I fall into that, I'm never going to move forward. I have to stop and say, you know, whatever happened, it's not what comes into a man that defiles him. It's what comes out of him. I will own what I did. I own my part of things. I sit and I go, God, where was I in all of this? How did I go wrong? If I was a better husband, I wouldn't be where I am now. Now, I'm not condemned in that, going, oh, I was no good. No, it is what it is. But I own what I am. And when I own what I am, I'm free. And it's the same in faith. Your faith, own it. Own the fact that God put it in you. And if God put it in you, the world can't take it. Nobody can take it. So it's there. I own it. It's who I am. I know it's coming. I don't know when it's coming. But you know what? I guess I got to wait. And that waiting's a shocker. That waiting is so hard. But it's not when we live. It's not when we go and we do things with our kids. It is when we medicate. I'm going to stay busy. I'm going to work harder. I'm going to spend more time doing this and spend more time. You know what we lose? We lose the intimacy of life. Because we're trying, we're striving, we're trying to ultimately control because we feel like we're not good enough. Really, because of our past. We see what we've done. We see the yuck that we are. We see the junk of that, but we can't grasp unconditional love. God just says, I love you. I don't care what you've done. I love you. I don't define you by your actions. I see you through my love. So today, my New Year's thing, I want to leave you all with the greatest act of faith when God gives it to us at that initial giving. Now, just let it go. Leave it sit in your life, but don't try to figure it out. Don't try to control it. And then in that is the greatest act of faith. And it's the greatest act of our love, because I'm saying, God, I trust you that this is going to come about. And because I trust you, I take my life, I take my fears, my loneliness, my whatevers, I put it all in you. And I live. And I live. Live today. Live in the fullness of what God's got. Because I keep saying it, freedom will pull in the free. When you're free, it'll pull in those that are free. It'll pull in those that want to be free. It'll pull in the miracles of life. And you're one of those.